Hi guys and welcome. Knembon here, checking out the new Minecraft Nothing Edition, Blank Edition, Bedrock Edition after the Better Together update. So currently I think we are at 1.2.1. It's hard to tell with this one. Anyway, so not so long time ago, thanks to our friends at Mojang, the Bedrock Edition has been updated to 1.2 with a very impressive changelog, bringing it ever so closer to old beloved Minecraft Java Edition. So the purpose of this video is to have a kind of a chilled out look at the game mechanics, mob spawning mechanics, redstone mechanics, and experiment a little bit to see what this new beast is all about. So first, the primary thing is timings. Minecraft Java Edition runs on 20 of so-called ticks, which means that all the important events in the game are processed 20 times a second. So to test it, since there's no scoreboard here, we can use the time command to monitor ticks. And for that I'll use a simple command block with a time query datam command inside, and I'll set it to a repeating, and then if I power it, as you can clearly see, is 20 ticks per second. So it's the same as Java Edition. So the next question is how far from the player those ticks are actually being processed. So in comparison with Java version, all the random ticks happen 128 blocks around the player, mob spawn 128 blocks around the player. All the blocks and tile entities are processed in the entire loaded area. So if you have, for example, render distance of 16, that's 1000 chunks, plus the spawn chunks, which is about 500, maybe I'm wrong. So that's quite a bit of chunks. So here we have this ticking command block here showing us the time. And if we move out, as you can see here, we have here on the X, our coordinates are raising. And the command blocks is actually stopping when we move more than 64 blocks away. So I actually experimented a little bit and find out that all the events in the game, including mob spawning, blocks ticking, even command blocks, are only executed within 4 ticks around the player. And the rest what we see regardless of our render distance, in this case we have 12, so quite a bit. We can see, for example, these contraptions over there are not even processed, or nothing happens there. So a little quick note, because I've heard people comparing performance of Java Edition and Bedrock Edition, saying the Bedrock Edition is much smoother, but it makes the Java Edition injustice. Obviously Bedrock is performing better because there is nothing happening here, unless it's very close to the player. As I just said, with typical scenario, the render distance of 16, Java version has to deal with about 20 times more stuff than in the Bedrock Edition. Obviously Java Edition would perform much better if it would only take the area just near the player, but everybody would be quite pissed because then my contraptions are not working, my farmers are not working unless I babysit them. So regarding the redstone system, let's switch the command type here from repeating to impulse and check this out. This is actually really interesting. Did you notice anything suspicious? Let's do the same experiment in Java version. Okay, I'm flicking the lever or lever, whatever. You can see we can only see even numbers. So our first suspicion here is that regardless of the fact that the game runs on 20 ticks per second, the entire redstone system runs actually on 10 ticks per second, regardless of the cases. So what we have here, and that's my suspicion, is unlike in Java where every single action meets a reaction right away and it's organized in those ticks, and multiple events can happen even within the same tick, and we can control, for example, how pistons behave within the same tick. And that's how we can have those cool 0 tick and 1 tick contraptions. In this case it may not be the case, and to prove it we have another experiment here with water. So in Java, water spreads exactly 5 ticks per block. So in a second, water spreads exactly 4 blocks. And judging what I see here, it's probably the same thing. So here we have a little water channel, and here the dispenser can dispense water into this block, which can spread to the following blocks. And we have here 2 rows of observers, and those observers, one of them run into the command blocks, and we have our time query command block over there. And on the right hand side we have dispensers or droppers, whatever. And those are just to notify us orally about what happens. So let's listen carefully what happens if I send that water out. Okay, so let us hear this in Java Edition. Anything suspicious? First of all, in Java it was very rhythmic, like tick 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 tick, because we have those 4 actions per second and they happen exactly 5 ticks apart. In Bedrock, if we have this 2-tick resolution, then the water spreads every 5 game ticks, but the observers and dispensers can only react with this 2-tick resolution, and that's why we had on the left hand side. I can repeat that. We can either have 4 or 6 ticks apart. And if we listen closely, we have this written. It's not really even, it's like pa-pam, 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 pa-pam. Yeah, and this is actually a proof that the entire Redstone system actually runs specifically on 10 ticks. And that's actually pretty mad, because in Java we could extend and retract the same piston or multiple pistons within the same even game tick and be able to very quickly move blocks and do stuff. Even within one game tick, it was possible to do a lot of interesting things. Here, nothing happens, like all the inputs are probably collected within 2 ticks, one after another, and then they're being processed and something happens, and then they are being executed after those 2 game ticks, which means that nothing can happen actually instantly in this version, even with observers. So everything happens, every event's inputs are collected for those 2 game ticks, block ticks, whatever, and then they are being executed or acted upon in this, what we can call here a redstone tick. Okay, so let's test here a little bit of the basic redstone timing things. So we have here, for example, repeaters, so what you'd expect, 2 ticks apart. All the other basic components probably you'd expect to work the same way. Next we have pistons. It's actually a very important change. So in Java Edition they extend in 3 game ticks and they react to retraction instantly. So we have 3 or 0. And here in Bedrock we have 6 game ticks, so 3 what we call redstone tick. So that's twice as slower, and if we retract them, they are not instant, they are 2 ticks apart. So yeah, so this is much different than with Java Edition. And what we have next is observers. Observers react instantly. You can see that all the blocks that change the state, or at least they should have changed the state here. There's just obvious cases they work. We can see that it doesn't actually react to the dropper changes. So what would happen if we would phase 2 observers into each other, which in Java makes a really, really cool and modern clock. So we have this clock here that ticks very, very fast. We can see, we cannot even see what it does. So if I put, for example, dust here, you can see that's always on. But see what will happen if I, for example, place an observer here. See, it actually stays on, and it's because of this one being kind of bugged out. See, I place another observer, they're on. If I turn this off, see, they're all on. Although this observer here, they actually work. So this is just a visual glitch, and it will go off after some time by itself. So after our brief experiments with the loaded area around the player and also the redstone system, we can look into some practical solutions. So item elevators, that's something really important. In Java, recently this kind of elevators got their official support, in the sense that now items, when dropped inside the blocks, will slowly elevate towards the top, which makes it for a very simple item elevator. Unfortunately, in Bedrock, if I put a bunch of items here and close that in, you can see items are not flowing anywhere. So this kind of elevator is no good. We have to use actually dropper elevators. So this is a standard item pipe type elevator. It's simply we grab the output from that bottom dropper with a comparator, run it into a clock. In Java we just need to staircase it up like that. In Bedrock we actually have to point it into the dropper, which means that we have to run a separate signal to the comparator to the side in order to make a clock. Nevertheless, this actually item pipe type elevator works, and if we drop items here, you can see it's silent and it moves up items to the top. Why it's an item pipe type? Because items are actually getting stuck temporarily in these droppers on the way, because all those droppers are powered exactly at the same moment, which means that they move one element from the bottom dropper and they move them kind of in jumps up to the top one. So this would be like a very good solution if, for example, we have a farm and we just want to collect our drops and we don't care that 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever are being stuck permanently here, because they will be moved eventually with other stuff. So this works in Bedrock, no problem. Next is the proper elevator, and that's the design I was using for quite some time recently. If you put even a single item here in Java Edition, it will always and silently be up in the top container. However, as you can see, nothing happens, and this is actually because of the lack of quasi-connectivity. So the key to silent elevators, like proper elevators, is the fact that In Java Edition, with a single torch, we can power 2 droppers at the same time, and based on the processing order of those droppers, item is always processed first from the bottom dropper, goes up, then another torch activates another 2 sets of droppers, and the item goes bam bam, and so on and so forth. So we can actually have a proper silent elevator in Java thanks to the quasi-connectivity. In Bedrock it's a different situation, because in this case this torch actually powers only this dropper and not the dropper below it. So why no items are moving is because only every other dropper is being powered in this sequence. However, if we power the medium dropper directly, for example through a redstone dust or repeater, it powers not only that dropper but also dropper below it and above it, so 3 droppers in a row. And because of what seems to be a random processing order of those events, then it's not very reliable which dropper will actually act on it. So as you can see, I've been trying here to build some sort of an elevator that would run on this principle, but it just simply didn't work, probably because of the update order. So after very much so deliberations and tries, and I actually gave up on it, and this is actually the elevator, still the item pipe type elevator that actually is infinitely expandable. So we start exactly the same as at the beginning. So we have here a comparator, runs into a clock, and then we grab the same signal and runs it across, like cycling back and forth, so all those droppers will power exactly at the same time, which means that an item that's in here will eventually make its way up. And then when you run out of signal, we just make this kind of a bracket. The bracket has to go 1 up, so because this will be a different tick. So this dust here powers these through droppers 1, 2, and 3, and this dust over there from the next sequence, because it's in different section, actually powers these 3 droppers, and then the signal repeats. So as we can see, if we turn it on, this actually works. We can send items silently up to the very top as much as we want. So we can actually make this infinitely expandable. So let's switch to another topic. So since pistons are not dropping blocks in Bedrock, plus observers are actually immediate, this was actually one of the 1.11 snapshots. I think it was 1.11 with observers. There's a really cool feature that you can build this kind of really funny looking double piston extenders that actually worked, and the application was clear in, for example, 2x2 tree farms. But as we can clearly see, yeah, 2x2 trees and it don't grow in Bedrock. There's no 2x2 trees. But if there ever are 2x2 trees, this is the solution that one can be used. It's very easily tileable up in terms of to make a 2x2 tree farm. So for example, if the tree would grow in this position and fill up these blocks, you can see we can always push it to the side and make a room for the next tree. So for the lack of being able to make a 2x2 tree farm, what we can do, for example, is we have this funky door. And I know before you say something, yes, if you have a 2-wide door, you can just put pistons from both sides and just retract blocks. But that would make it for a very boring door. Like this one is I think way cooler. So we have opening sequence and we have the closing sequence. And the design is actually quite simple and it's actually quite funny. So what I would call it like a Mordor style doors. They are very easily stackable, and the action is actually pretty cool. So they actually open from the bottom and close also from the top to the bottom, so the bottom part stays open the longest. And design is actually very simple. So we have here those 2 double piston extenders next to each other, and then after some time the blocks are retracted back to their original position and we have our closed door. So note here on the side, since there is no quasi-connectivity between pistons, we cannot actually rely on it to power a wall of pistons. However, it is possible because the dust actually connects to pistons. So those pistons on the same level as the dust are connected to the dust and powered through the dust, and pistons below are powered through the blocks. So that's not an issue in this version because of that. And here I added a little bit of delay between each floor. Yes, you can just do it and fire them at the same time, but I thought it'd be a nice sequence to run them like that. So they run with a little bit of delay, then it's a little bit of delay at the top to actually allow us to go through, and the same torch tower going down to the bottom double piston extenders. So if we don't like the show of the redstone, here is another version that I just made. This is a little bit bigger, but it's only because we have extra space to store, in this case, open fence gates. If we press this button, it's the same thing. It opens, we can go through, and then it closes behind us, moving these blocks back, replacing open fence gates with door blocks. And yes, you might be thinking, yes, you could probably use open trapdoors here on the sides in order to push them, so we can actually have a proper way through, not obstructed by the look of the open fence gates. However, that's what I believe a bug in the game, at least with the Bedrock Edition. If you push an open trapdoor with a piston, it actually updates and closes again. That's never been the case in Java. I think maybe it was once and then it was marked as not intended and fixed. Especially that with fence gates it doesn't happen. So with fence gates they stay open as you push them, with trapdoors they actually close. There's another interesting quirk with the rails. For example, here we have a little rail track. If I remove blocks below them, you see the rails stay, and not to the point that actually you can it's fully functional. So for example, you can power them, you can put a minecart, and you can actually push it along. And you can walk through it because the rail doesn't have any collision box. However, for example, if we push the rail with a piston, you can push it on the flat surface, but if you push it in the middle of the air, it pops out. So it's quite inconsistent. I don't think the rails are supposed to be able to hang, especially that you cannot really place them in the middle of the air, but when you place and remove the block below them, you can actually keep them and use them. However, I wouldn't recommend using it, although it's pretty cool, because I think it might be removed really soon. Speaking of bugs, there's actually quite a bit of challenge I had with using a clone command to clone this contraption to the other side, because in Java with clone command you can actually tap complete your coordinates of the block that you're looking at. So for example, if you want to clone this entire structure from that block to that other corner, you can just look at the block and tap, and it will actually fill the coordinates for you. In this case, there is no such option. You can only set up the coordinates here in the upper left corner. However, if you start typing a command, you can see these coordinates are gone. And even if you want to, for example, put them on the side of like on a notepad and basically exit this window, you can either exit using escape, which actually removes them as well, or you can, for example, open chat as this removes them as well. So you have to remember them, put them in a notepad, and then you can, for example, want to clone from this block, okay, into, let's say, that block. You have to read those two coordinates and you have to put them on a piece of paper and then type them again. Thankfully you can paste stuff into the chat. You cannot unfortunately copy it from the chat. So that's kind of a little annoyance with the fill and clone commands that actually makes it pretty painful to even work in creative in Bedrock. Speaking of fill and clone command, there's actually an interesting bug I found accidentally by cloning one of those elevators. So if we have here two shulker boxes, one is purple or undyed, the second is white, and if we clone the entire structure here, boom, we have two shulker boxes and both are white. If we pick the white shulker box that's being cloned here, it is white. If we pick the undyed shulker box here, you can see it's actually undyed. And this will actually fix itself after relogging. So that's one inconsistency, I think. The fill and clone, that's something that probably doesn't update or doesn't transfer properly. Okay, so let's leave the redstone system and contraptions behind, and let's look at the mobs and mob spawning mechanics. So we have a little bit of a setup that I prepared to test mob spawning. So the first question is, do mobs spawn in darkness? You can see all of slimes around us, and if we set up the ground here to stone and make a roof, you can see indeed they do spawn in darkness. So that's fine. So let's do something else. Let's here change the roof to stone slabs. And as you can see, actually stone slabs don't block daylight. That's actually very different because in Java, stone slabs are actually not fully transparent. Interesting thing. So let's go back to the proper roof with the full blocks. Another test we can do is, for example, what happens if we replace the floor material. As you can see, mobs actually can spawn on glass, so that's a big deal, because glass was forever, like kind of the material that can be used to prevent mob spawning, but in this case, we can clearly see that's not the case. So what if, for example, we add in carpets, because carpets is also something that has a collision, so we shouldn't allow mobs to spawn. As you can see, carpets also don't prevent mobs from spawning, so that's interesting. Okay, so let's switch to slabs. Bottom slabs. Whew, at least we have one material that can prevent mobs from spawning, which is the slabs. Okay, so that's good. So let's try another trick from Java. What if we block some mob heights with trapdoors? In Java, this actually allows only spiders and creepers to spawn. In this case, yeah, we don't see many mobs actually either. Spider, yeah, so there's only spiders. So only spiders can actually spawn under trapdoors. However, there's also one very important thing that we have noticed. Here, we are here at the very bottom of the world, and in Java, in this kind of settings, we would have tons of mobs, actually entire mob cap filled pretty much almost instantly with mobs. It's because we are in the lowest subchunk and the spawning algorithms, how it works, it actually would make the entire thing just swarmed with mobs. Here in Bedrock, mob spawning is actually extremely slow. Not only it runs only within 4 chunks around the player, because that's the ticking area around the player, but also is very, very slow. So for now, we don't have any inclination how it works. However, at the end of this video, I'll actually show exactly how they spawn. I actually discovered it by accident. Regardless of all of that, we can still make a mob farm. So after my last Fun Farms episode, when I showed the very basic hostile mob farm you can build, lots of people were complaining, I build this mob farm and I play Xbox and it doesn't work for me, despite the title being Minecraft 1.12. And the truth is, there's actually two things that prevent it from working entirely, and they're independent of each other. So here I have a little cross section of the signal that is passed through from the top floor. Here we have a little bit, I put it on the side, so we have top over there and we have bottom of the farms over there. Let's imagine that, so we don't have too much water spilling. So in that design, the signal was actually going from the top through those observers that were actually not powering these dispensers directly, but they were updating them directly and powering through quasi-connectivity. So the water was able to trigger, and then the other dispenser would actually detect that state change of that dispenser and basically pass the signal through. Here, first of all, observers don't even react to dispensers changing their states, so that part doesn't work. Also, there's no quasi-connectivity, so despite the fact that this observer actually notifies that dispenser about the change, the dispenser decides, no, I'm not powered, I'm not flashing anything, so that's why it all breaks. However, we can fix it actually by reversing a little bit of the mechanics. So we have here a signal that's passed along through this observer into the dispenser that's actually facing down, so it's powering the dispenser directly, and the dispenser dispenses the water into this section, and then the water is being detected by this observer and passes signal to the next dispenser, and so on and so forth. So it works somehow. If you, for example, flash the system, you see it actually does it pretty nicely. However, if we retract it, you can see that there are issues, because with retracting, it's actually because we are flashing a large area, the water actually goes back and forth a couple of times in front of the observer, which actually confuses it quite a bit, which makes it almost impossible to flash it reliably. What we can do is we can raise the entire system by one block, and what would happen, we have here observers in the floor kind of sticking up, and then if the water is dispensed from the dispensers, the water actually flows kind of around the observer, which means that if we remove this water again, since this water is actually higher than the other water around it, this means that the water here on the sides would never actually flush back onto these observers' faces, so we can have a consistent way of powering in back and forth. As you can see, water flashing, and then water retracting and clean. The only difference in the design is because we are making this kind of ridge to water to go up, we actually have to build the entire farm 2 blocks wider, so the spawning platforms are not 7 blocks wide, but they are actually 9 blocks wide, which can be beneficial because the farm will have significantly more spawning spaces. So that's the design over here. It's built exactly in the same manner as the one that I have in my tutorial, and as you can see, we can also do the cheaty water like we can do with Java, so we can have this water overhanging without support. So that's the collection pool. Also, we can notice that because of the larger spawning paths, I actually increase the size of the catching area by 2 blocks as well, compared to the tutorial. So if you want to build it in whatever the Better Together update, just follow the tutorial, just make the lower pool bigger, and with this kind of a dispenser observer pattern. And then you make the roof out of solid blocks to prevent daylight to creeping in, and then you can put slabs, because slabs are fully transparent, but however they will prevent mobs from spawning. And also in the middle here we have to end up with an observer, because observer is the only block that can detect the changes in that repeater over here. So that's how we can send pulses down the chute. Other than that, the design is exactly the same. And if you go to the bottom, you can see I already accumulated quite a bit after maybe, I don't know, an hour here. So the rates are actually really bad, but I don't think you will be able to get anything better in this edition. So I moved here away just so that the farm is at the edge of the ticking area, and this gives us a little bit of insights of the spawning algorithm. So it turns out, it seems like mobs are spawning in columns. So the game starts by selecting a random X and Z coordinate and then goes up from the bottom of the world to the top, trying to spawn a mob almost on every single spot. That's very different from vanilla, because in vanilla, in Java, what happens is there's only one spot selected and then the pack of mobs is spawning there. We can also notice how pack spawning works. So instead of spawning mobs in individual positions around the spawning spot, it spawns a group of mobs within the same point, and they're hoping that they will disperse by the time player shows up there. Interesting mechanics. But this shows that you cannot really utilize low Y value spawning, and the spawning is actually very slow regardless how you build the farm. If you want to have lots of spawns, you can just build this farm as high as you want up to the world limit, and it should be all fine and spawning more mobs. Okay, so that was it, guys. A quick video on guess and figure out what's going on in terms of the redstone and mob spawning mechanics in the new Minecraft with no name edition. In my opinion, and it is just my opinion, this version is still far behind the Java version. We got used to bashing the bugs on the Java version, calling the MCPE or the Bedrock whatever the clean or the bug-free one. And that's clearly not the case. I just stumbled upon today plenty of bugs, weird and inconsistent behaviors today. And we are just not used to scrutinize this version that much, and maybe that's why we don't see those things. The redstone system is much more simplified here in this version, and it's much less exciting to my taste, but it might be easier to learn for the new players. However, they won't be able to learn more than what they see. Mob spawning also doesn't allow to accumulate lots of spawns in one small location, so no hope for small and efficient farms for now. Another thing is a very small ticking area around the player, which means that the player essentially needs to literally babysit a contraption or a farm in order to get the results of it. Oh, and speaking of bugs, check this moon, guys. Let's time add. Okay. See, moonception. So at the end, what is definitely still missing is the lack of the official dedicated server support for Bedrock that everybody can freely download and run to be able to play with their friends. So for now, this makes, and this is just my opinion, a good platform just for a single player or some mini games on for-profit servers only. Despite all of that, Bedrock Edition is getting closer and closer to the Java feature set and getting closer with impressive jumps. But there is still a long way to go, and I wish they would take more inspiration for the core game mechanics from the Java edition, which after making this video I actually learned to appreciate even more than I did before. So that's definitely it, guys. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you are new, tell me what you think about all of those things that I showed here today in the comments, and see you in the next one. Maybe. We'll see. Bye bye.